Good evening. Since 6:04, the Board of Education has been in closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees or legal counsel, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or legal counsel to determine its validity, collective negotiating matters between the school board and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more class of employees, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the school board has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the school board finds an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. I will entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second have been heard. Please call the roll, Ms. Patton.
McMillan. Oh, excuse me. Blastic.
Aye.
Here. Kelly Black.
Aye.
Walensky.
Aye.
Kush.
Aye.
Kosminski.
Aye.
The motion passes. We are in open. Good evening and welcome to the September 8th, 2025 school board meeting. Our mission is to empower students to develop a learner's mindset, demonstrate adaptability, communicate effectively, think critically, and become global citizens. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Board members present this evening: Charles Kush, Melissa Kelly Black, Joe Kosminski, Holly Blastic, and Mark Walensky.
Please join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, item 4.0, item 4, recognition, item 4.01, good news.
Okay, we do have some good news to share. Both Naperville Central and Naperville North were ranked within the top 50 schools in Illinois by the U.S. News and World Report. Central ranks 22nd and North 26th. All 5 high schools in the Naperville area from District 203 and our neighbors in 204 made the top 50 list. Congratulations. All right. On Monday, August 25th, Naperville Central was happy to host a DuPage Valley Conference Student Group Leadership Summit, where they brought together the leaders from all DVC student sections: the Red Hawk Rowdies, Dog Pound, Mustang Stampede, Nequa Gold Rush, Warrior Nation, and the DeKalb Crow's Nest. The objective was to share ideas for growing school spirit and develop a concrete plan for encouraging sportsmanship between the schools during competition. It was a terrific day of fun and collaboration. And for a final product, the kids created a sportsmanship video to be shared via social media by all schools. And then finally, in a landmark moment for Naperville School District 203, Naperville Central High School and Naperville North High School's IHSA flag football teams kicked off their inaugural seasons. Both teams are undefeated, and at least as of the writing of the good news. These games are not only celebrate a new sport for Naperville, but also stand as a testament to the continued growth and positive momentum of women's athletics. It's a celebration of these athletes' trailblazing spirit and a positive step forward in the rich history of women's sports in April 203. That's the good news for tonight.
All right, thank you. All right, we've reached the point in our agenda for public comment. The Board of Education welcomes comments in the public at its meetings. Citizens who wish to address the Board of Education should identify themselves by name. Comments by individual shall be limited to 3 minutes. If the individual is representing multiple individuals or a group, they shall be allowed to speak for 5 minutes. The board respectfully requests that speakers refrain from commenting about specific individuals. As I call individual for public comment, I will also designate if there is a next speaker so that they will have appropriate time to prepare. As outlined in Board of Education Policy 2.230, individuals addressing the Board of Education to conduct themselves with respect and civility toward others. Individuals are free to express their criticism regarding decisions or policies, but the Board of Education expects that they will refrain from personal attacks on our superintendent, Board of Education members, and administrative staff. Because the questions raised in public comment address district operational matters, the superintendent is the board's designee to coordinate response to public comment and will apprise the board accordingly. At this point, I would like to welcome Jason Copeland.
Good evening, Jason Copeland. Want to thank the board for putting your questions about Press 118 and 119 in writing. Until now, your public stance was safely vague, like District 203 is complying with state law. But your own questions reveal the truth. Some members of this board are openly considering breaking federal law, and you've documented it for everyone to see. So bravo. Let's be clear, Title IX is federal law, and it's supreme over conflicting state or local guidance. It's right there. It's in Article 6 of the Constitution. Non-compliance isn't theoretical, and it carries real consequences. Complaints have already been filed. A Department of Education investigation is coming. When it lands, this district will be on the hook. But your written questions aren't just questions, they're a paper trail. Accepting federal funds while deliberately refusing to follow Title IX, that could be prosecuted as fraud under 18 U.S.C. 1001. Conspiring to deny students their civil rights, 18 U.S.C. 241. You've practically handed the evidence to the investigators, blaming IASB guidance and hoping for a new DOE or DOG isn't going to save you. You could do the right thing, comply with federal law, preserve exclusive spaces, and stop gambling with the district's future, but instead you're choosing ideology over responsibility. Sports teams, bathrooms, and locker rooms separated by sex have worked incredibly well for decades for 99.99% of the students. The only thing that's changed is this board's willingness to risk everything for a needless experiment. You know there are other solutions, and it's beyond me why you won't implement them. If only the new state rules about mental health evaluations for students applied to board members, we'd finally understand why you make these choices. Because too often when faced with the choice between sanity and ideology, you choose ideology. Shame on you. And go Bears.
Okay, I have no additional slips of paper. So this will conclude our public comment period. As I mentioned before, the superintendent, the board has designated our superintendent as a spokesperson for the district, and as our designee to respond to public comment, he will apprise the board accordingly. So again, this will conclude our public comment period. All right. Item 6, action by consent, adoption of the personnel report. Oh, I accept the motion to approve. Yeah.
I move approval of item 6.01, adoption of the personnel report.
Second.
Motion and a second have been heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Kuzminski,
Aye.
Kelly Black,
Aye.
Walensky,
Aye.
Blastic,
Aye.
Kush.
Aye. The motion passes. All right, item 7.0, communications, Board of Education reports. Does any Board of Education member have a report relative to your responsibilities as a Board of Education member? Okay. Item 7.02, President's report. I do not have a report this time around. So item 7.03, Superintendent's staff school report.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to invite members of my team to come in and begin to assemble in preparation for the following report. But as they do that, I'm just going to address any question that may be lingering, because we've had a few questions come in regard to the role Innovative School Experience played in recent contract negotiations. Those negotiations don't require that any of the things within those recommendations be implemented, simply outlined what it would look like should there ever be a vote to move forward with it. And ultimately, the teams removed any of that language from the contract to avoid further conflict and ensure a stable learning environment for our students. With the contract now approved, the plan that was presented to the board earlier this year is not moving forward. And we will focus on the challenges that remain, not simple problems, but working together, we will work to find solutions. And so I know to the community members of our staff, it's been some difficult conversations, but we are committed to listening and working openly to ensure that we can move forward. Every decision we make will be rooted in a devotion and commitment to our students, And by focusing on them, we will move forward together. So with that, I'll invite our team up, and that will lead us right into our presentation in regard to student discipline. This is an annual presentation we give to the Board of Education as a part of Policy 7190. And so summary is loaded, and they'll begin.
Question for Dan?
Yeah, there's so much confusion about the innovative school day. So can I just have a yes or no? The understanding that a lot of people think is that that was ruled out with the teachers' union contract. So is it ruled out, yes or no?
The plan that was presented to the Board
No,
of
just yes or no, because it gets confusing for people. I'm not trying to be rude or confrontational.
The innovative
but-
school experience plan that was presented is not in the contract, and so we
So,
moved on.
no, my
So
question
we've moved on.
isn't if it's in the contract, it's can we, during the term of that contract, make those changes?
Make what changes?
Just because something isn't in a contract doesn't mean, I'm just
Well,
asking, so if,
We have to work within the language of the contract.
no, I know that, but that seems like a fancy way of going around that, not everyone has a legal, so they just want to know, people just want to know,
The innovative school
can we,
experience.
under this contract, implement the innovative day experience? Yes or no?
We cannot.
Just that clear.
We cannot.
So we,
I think
okay.
it's pretty clear. Dan just said we cannot. That's a no.
Oh,
So
no,
can we-
that's
so-
fine that I
so
got it on the
then- So
record.
then let us move on then. Can
Yeah,
we?
fine.
Okay, thank you. Team, go right ahead.
Oh, thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Every year, the administration provides an update reviewing our district's discipline data. These slides provide an overview of data related to behavior threat assessments, restraints and timeouts, and then data from each specific level.
Tonight, we'll talk about behavior threat assessment. We'll discuss restraint timeout. Each level will summarize the behavior incidents that they saw during the 24-25 school year and do a little bit of comparison to historical patterns. And we will also discuss student sense of belonging.
The district utilizes a behavior threat assessment to determine the level of threat a student may pose to a peer or staff member. Since the beginning of the 22-23 school year, we have conducted a total of 834 threat assessments, with the majority of these assessments being identified as no threat or transient. This suggests that our Tier 1 instruction, which teaches students how to handle frustration and conflict in positive ways, is making a significant impact. When a student's physically aggressive behavior poses an imminent danger to self or others, physical restraint and/or a timeout may be necessary to ensure the safety of all individuals. Data representing our early childhood through connections populations represents an overall decrease in behaviors requiring the use of a restraint or a timeout, with 44 students during the 23-24 school year and a decrease to 29 students during the 24-25 school year. This represents less than 1% of the total student population.
We will now transition to a summary of student behavior at the high school level. In the 2024-2025 school year, there were 6,348 behavior incidents recorded at our high schools. 65% of high school students had no behavior referrals last year. Another 21% of high school students had only 1 or 2 behavioral referrals. When combined, 86% of the student population are responsible for approximately 22% of all recorded behavior events. These students are considered Tier 1 students from a behavior lens. Tier 2 students, which comprise approximately 9% of the student population, have between 3 to 6 behavior referrals and are responsible for approximately 29% of all recorded behavior events. Tier 3 students, representing 5% of our overall high school population, have 7 or more behavioral referrals and are responsible for approximately 50% of all recorded behavior events. These students receive the most intensive support from the Student Services Department and our student advocacy specialists. Our student advocacy specialists provide interventions to students following suspendable offenses. Also, they support those with excessive referrals, students with an activity or athletic activity code violation, students with excessive absences, and others. While the types of offenses vary widely, attendance-related issues comprise over 60% of behavioral referrals. Class or school truancy is the most frequent violation, with slightly over 2,100 incidents, making up 33% of all disciplinary referrals, followed closely by tardies to class or school, being just under 1,900 incidents, or nearly 30% of referrals. No other category of disciplinary violation comprises more than 10% of total referrals. The most severe behaviors are the most rare. Referrals for fighting, bullying, harassment, or the possession or use of alcohol, tobacco, or drugs comprise less than 1% each of total disciplinary infractions. Most behavior incidents are resolved without using exclusionary discipline. Approximately 21% of referrals are handled with some type of conference involving deans, social workers, counselors, and parents. Almost half of high school behavior referrals are handled with lunch detentions, usually for attendance-related matters. Before and after school detentions are used to resolve approximately 21% of behavioral referrals. And exclusionary discipline is only required to resolve 6% of behavior incidents. The demographic information for students who receive behavioral referrals is listed on this slide. Sophomores have the most referrals overall, and exclusionary discipline peaks during sophomore year. Last year, nearly 40% of all students suspended were sophomores. Seniors have the most behavioral referrals, due in large part to attendance, since seniors tend to take the most liberties when it comes to their coming to school near the end of the school year. While seniors have the most referrals in general, however, they have the fewest suspensions. Our Black, African American, and Hispanic Latino students are overrepresented in incidents of exclusionary discipline. Unfortunately, this data has not changed much from previous years. These students continue to be monitored by our student support personnel. It is worth noting that since relatively few behavior referrals result in exclusionary discipline, a small shift in student behavior can have a significant impact on the overall percentages.
81% of middle school students do not receive even a single minor referral, and 94% receive 3 or fewer in a school year. Minor referrals are developmentally appropriate at this age and provide a low-stakes opportunity for support, restorative conversations, and reflection. Our students overall are very amazing, and these moments are part of the learning process that helps them grow and move forward. Important to note, 95% of our students demonstrate positive conduct and contribute to safe, supportive school environments. Last year, only 4.4% of middle school students received exclusionary discipline, a figure consistent with prior years and aligned with the MTSS or PBIS benchmarks that fewer than 5% of students typically require Tier 3 supports. The most common contexts were before and after school, hallways, and unstructured time such as lunch and recess, with fighting and aggressive conduct and derogatory comments as the leading behaviors for exclusionary discipline.
At the elementary level, 99.2% of students are not involved in exclusionary discipline. The focus in elementary schools with student behavior is that behavior expectations must be taught with the same intentionality as academics, since developing students' self-regulation, problem solving, and social emotional skills is a critical part of the learning process. Through systemic training of school teams at each elementary building, implementation of the behavior solutions, processes, and strategies were implemented across all buildings in our district since the start of the 24-25 school year. This includes the teaching of clear expectations through Tier 1 strategies, the acknowledgement and celebration of students following school rules and expectations, and student reflections on behavior throughout the school day. For students requiring additional support through Tier 2 school teams, creative behavior academies for small groups of students, which offers targeted interventions focused on skill building. And students who need additional support are also offered individualized coaching and instruction to target specific skills. Together, these approaches create a proactive system that enforces accountability, promotes a culture of respect and responsibility, fosters a safe and respectful learning environment, and equips all students with the tools they need to thrive academically, socially, and emotionally.
A strong sense of belonging is essential for student success. As research shows, it not only improves academic performance, enrollment, and mental health, but also reduces absenteeism and discipline concerns. Belonging is a key goal within the district's comprehensive equity plan and school improvement plans, measured through the Panorama Student Perception Survey. These results help schools identify both strengths and areas of concern, enabling strategies that support specific student groups while also promoting a safe, respectful school community for all. Our student perception survey results indicate that elementary students generally report higher levels of belonging, though there is a slight downward trend that we are monitoring. Fortunately, these results have held steady at 67% in recent years, while secondary students have demonstrated steady growth in belonging from 46% in 2021 to 55% in 2025. In grades 6 through 12, students in each targeted demographic group, such as race, ethnicity, and EL status, etc., have experienced approximately 7 percentage points growth in their sense of belonging from 2021 to present. This progress suggests that targeted efforts such as student advisory councils, inclusive curriculum, and climate building strategies are helping students feel more connected and in turn should lead to improved attendance and reduced behavioral concerns. The district equity team and student success platform provide additional support by aligning data-driven insights with MTSS practices to improve both student outcomes and school culture. While progress has been made, the district remains committed to strengthening students' sense of belonging as a foundation for improved learning, healthier behavior, and greater connectedness to Naperville 203.
In summary, we'd like to highlight that of the threat assessments conducted, a high number of them have been resolved as transient during the 2024-2025 school year. There has been a significant decrease in behavior requiring the need for a restraint or a timeout. The vast majority of our students do not exhibit behaviors which require intervention or discipline, but when they do require intervention, the vast majority of those behaviors do not require exclusionary discipline. We will continue to support our students with behavioral concerns in an effort to reduce discipline predictability based on demographic characteristics. At this time, we will entertain any questions.
4 questions. I'll just simply point out, I can't remember if somebody mentioned it, there is an executive summary with information that's contained within board docs as well.
Okay, questions from the board? Holly?
Just to start with questions kind of defining some of these terms, what's the difference between, or how are we using and defining restraint and also timeout?
Yep. So a restraint is when a student's behavior is poses a danger to self or others, and we have to go hands-on. And so any staff member that would have to do that requires to go through extensive training to ensure that we do that in a safe way. And it is meant to be as short as possible. Whenever we do that, there's also state guidelines that we need to time it. We have to keep a log of what de-escalation strategies were utilized prior to needing to put a child into a restraint, and then all of that data is submitted to ISB within 24 hours. A timeout is when a student is secluded from their peers and not given the opportunity to leave a space. That typically happens when there's a lot of maybe throwing objects, or they're trying to leave the building in an unsafe way. That also has a lot of requirements that come with it. It is as short as possible. There has to be line of sight at all times. A staff member needs to be in that location with the student at all times. And then as soon as the student is calm, the door's opened.
Right. Just one follow-up on that. They were lumped together. Do we know the data on, is one more prevalent than the other?
We
Or
do
by
have
grade?
the data. Yes. Sorry, let me pull it up. I can give the data. Saying that one is more prevalent than the other is hard because there are times that they're kind of combined. So there could be times when a student is in a timeout and then the behavior escalates and then a restraint is required while they're within the timeout. So it is hard to say whether one is more prevalent than the other just because of that happens at times. So last year, we had 58 restraints and 84 timeouts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joe?
Yeah, thank you for your report on this. It's encouraging to see the middle school and high school level belonging increasing. Regarding the elementary that has this kind of slow decline, is that decline statistically significant? And what are schools doing to try to combat that and try to improve it?
So each school uses the sense of belonging data when they're creating their school improvement plans, and they'll use the data that's specific to their building and then create action steps that go along with that to narrow the decline and provide targeted interventions or supports for students, or they'll implement sometimes school-wide strategies in order to address those declines.
Thank you.
Melissa?
Okay, before I start, I'm going to start by reading a statement, and people have commented on this, like why I do it. Part of it is like, this is the homework I do for all of this. So I'm synthesizing all this and everything else on the agenda. So sometimes to make sure that what I say is precise, I do that. So just thought I would explain that. As a board, our responsibility is to provide oversight that ensures fairness, safety, and equity for all students. Right now, we cannot do that effectively because the discipline reports we receive were incomplete, inconsistent, or too often focused on surface level numbers rather than outcomes. We hear aggregate counts, but not the incident level details that show where the problems are happening, what supports were provided, and whether those supports worked. We hear subgroup disparities, but we don't see measurable goals for reducing them. We hear about training and restorative practices, but we don't see fidelity checks and evidence of impact. Without accurate outcome-based data, we're essentially being asked to govern in the dark. That's not acceptable. Tonight, I would like us to look at, I'll ask some questions, but the incident level and disaggregated data by subgroup, outcomes such as recidivism, and intervention effectiveness, contextual information like location, time of incidents, clear reporting on restraint and timeout, behavioral threat assessments, MTSS interventions, and the panorama climate data. This would provide us the opportunity to make sure that corrective action plans for the schools that can make sure that they can address our the disproportionalities between the different groups and our low belonging scores. I think we should also, I know now in reading this, I know I sound a little negative. The part of the job that's hard, you may very well be doing all this. It's just for the accountability piece, we need to know that. We need to know specific, because when we make decisions, we need to be accountable to the taxpayers. These measures are not about creating extra work. The data already exists in our systems like MTSS, Panorama, and incident logs. What this, we want to see the full picture. That way, you know, we can celebrate the success and work on the needs and not just the intentions. Because a lot of when we get these reports, they're so general, and they're a lot of times coached as aspirational, but there's no measurement piece built into it. So I have, with all my research, you know, there are things we could do. I really think it's our job as a board to keep the administration. We don't need to be making the decisions. We just need to know that what you're doing is working, and if it slows down or it regresses, that data is being utilized and we see it as what can we do to make sure we do better. So I think that'd be something as a board I'd like to discuss. Moving forward is maybe we could get together as a board and decide, what, you know, this information's already there. I don't want to board and read everything to everyone, but I think it would be good if we say, this is the information we deem important just for oversight. We're not going to make operational, but our job is to make sure the operations are working, and that we have, like, this is what we expect from the report, because it's not fair to you guys if you're told to give one report, and like I'm a board member saying you're not giving the data, you know, it causes conflict we don't want. So if we have a clear procedure that everyone knows, this is the information we'd like, this is how often, and that we get it frequently enough that we can shift gears, just like with kids. We want assessments throughout. You don't want to wait till late to catch something. And I think too that I go back to when I'm up here, we have certain things on the agenda that we talk about, and it seems like it's in isolation. But when we talk about the sense of belonging, and we're talking about some of these other programs, they have a foundation. Those needs, safety, and some of those other considerations have to be met until they can academically learn. So this is a very important piece, and I think that there are areas that we've seen some slow growth that we need to go back and just keep it accountable, and that way it's easy for all of us to have this conversation, because as a board, there are benchmarks that are out there that say that this is what the norms are, and to make sure we're within those norms. Is that something the board members are willing to have a conversation about?
Other comments from other board members? Joe?
I guess I'm a little confused about what exactly you're asking for. Is if I remember correctly, on the school improvement plans, for example, the belonging data is there for each school, so we can get a breakdown of that information, or we do get a breakdown of that information. It's not here, but it's school improvement plans are
They're
from
actually
November.
not. That's in all my research. One of the things that I addressed was that school improvement plans, first of all, we don't have a set that we expect a certain level at all our schools. So that's one issue. So there's not an overall consensus of what are we expecting everyone to do and holding everyone to the same benchmark. The other thing is we don't get the data, just like right now. Somebody could argue, well, we had this conversation. Well, a lot of the information that you need to break down, like we need to know where these incidents are happening, or I want to know the outcomes. That's the biggest thing with all of this, is the accountability piece of how do we know what we're doing is working? Because once we know that, we can say, great, you guys are really good at this, but this is where we need to get better. I mean, not to make Dan feel bad with the Bears game tonight. I said I wouldn't bring it up, but talking about like the sports.
Don't talk about the Bears game. Just can we stay on topic, please? You said you didn't
Charles,
want Dan to feel bad.
did
Please
you
do
feel,
not address the
okay, I'm gonna stop this and go. I
Please do not
made a
address the
joke out of
superintendent.
levity, and
Okay,
it bothered
but-
you so much you had to.
But I think you would agree, these aren't joking matters. I think that the points that you're making are valid points, and I think that, weaving a joke in there is probably inappropriate, just
Well,
because it may be
let me
misconstrued.
explain it.
That's all.
Let me
Okay?
explain it. I find, unfortunately, the environment on this board to be toxic a lot. So sometimes bringing levity, that may not be your style, Charles. That's fine. But what I don't think should be the style of this board is intolerance. Just like we have students who learn or talk or speak differently, is it okay for us to go, you shouldn't have joked when you answered that question? I don't think the way, if we maybe developed a better relationship and could joke, or if somebody does something, Charles, if that offended you, please feel free to go to me later and we can actually have a conversation. That's how we're, But creating this type of environment where you slammed on the gavel because you didn't like my joke, did you think I meant it maliciously? I don't think Dan, like, that's not anything bad about Dan, about I was trying to build a camaraderie. So that is my point on that. But the big thing is I want the outcomes and the accountability. And we don't know what we're doing, and we owe it to the people. We can't be oversight if we don't know what the outcomes are.
Okay. Joe, are you done with your comments?
I just want to, I guess my only comment would be the schools lay out or determine their needs, and the goal is for every school to grow. And schools start at different places, they have different challenges, and you know, if we have just one benchmark, you know, if a school hits that benchmark, then they can just sit back and, you know, kind of kick back and relax, right? But we want to keep seeing growth at every school. So I don't necessarily agree with a district-wide. You have to hit it here, and once you check that box, you're all good. I want to see, you know, continued growth at every school in every area.
So, go
Holly?
ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna follow up on that. Like, I appreciate the recognition that we want to tailor it to the needs of each school, and one that's knocking it out of the park, we want to keep moving the level higher if they're able to do that. But I wanted to kind of talk about, like, I'm open to these conversations about ways we can always improve these things and get more information for the board. But one concern I have is, you know, it does need to be aggregate in the aggregate, because this is about behavior, private matters regarding students, and we don't want to get to such a specific level that it's identifying and causes greater concern. So I share, you know, an interest in being curious about ways we can improve these reports, but keeping in mind the protection and privacy of the students in those specific school environments.
Yeah, it wouldn't be revealing student information, and would my board members feel differently? Because this is sometimes how I feel. If the benchmarks were how the groups that we say we use their programs, and they do say you should have these benchmarks. That's why I said we defer to them. These are not things that I came up with that I thought were great. These were based on the programs that are best practices that are recommended. So I guess sometimes my frustration comes of, like, you know what, we all have different backgrounds, but I do think I think we're all want to see positive outcomes. But should we defer to our experiences, or is that where we go with what they teach us as board members, to go evidence-based and data? So if I could present data to my fellow board members that showed these were best practices by many organizations and the very programs we use, would that sway anyone's mind, or even be open to having that conversation?
Mark?
Yeah, I think, speaking for myself, I think we would always look to find ways to improve what we're doing. I don't think anyone has any issue with that. I think I agree with what Joe and Holly said. I mean, there's relying on the expertise of the team and the data that they have, that they then aggregate and share with us in a way that is easily understandable. I think also when I did some of the math on this, we're not talking about lots of students that are causing behavior, or that have behavioral issues. We don't, and I don't want to have the community think that we have a lot of students that are not behaving properly. An overwhelming majority of them are behaving correctly. There's a relatively small group of students in our community, in our buildings, that are having these behavioral issues. I would much rather, I think from my perspective, is just be sure that those students are getting the interventions that they need, and recognizing we probably, as much as we'd like it to happen, we're never going to get to zero.
No,
No,
that's not the
we're never
benchmark,
going to get to zero. But how can we get better? And I think, you know, based on the questions I've asked, talking about, is there any indicators that we have? I think the response I got was there really isn't any. So things seem to be coming up in students' lives, like in all of our lives. And we need to be agile enough to address those behaviors when they come up. So I'm not sure getting more information is going to change my questions, and I think also the success that the team has seen.
So, two comments. One, in response to the question about, I'll just piggyback on Mark's comments about more data, not more data, but any information in terms of how we can improve and things like that. So I think that we're always open to any information that you'd want to share with your fellow board members about, documentation or whatever of things, and then we can at least have that so we can take a look at it and then make a determination after having the opportunity to review that. I did have a question for the group. We mentioned that the sense of belonging, we're looking at that as an early indicator, some of the improvements we've seen there as an early indicator of addressing some of the kind of the truancy issues and some of the other things that we're seeing. So the theory is that the better the sense of belonging, the more likely students are to, show up at school and show up on time and ready to learn. How much of a lag time would we project between kind of when we see the increases in the sense of belonging and then how long we think that'll take to cascade into the increases we expect to see, or the decreases rather we expect to see in truancy rates?
No, I was just going to note that that's something that we can take back, maybe connect with Dr. Knowlton in order to make a determination and to be able to share that information with the board, unless, Mark, you have something specific.
There's a student belonging piece. There may also be just a scheduling piece to this as well. We have 7 class sort of slots, if you will, in a standard student day plus lunch in an 8-period school day, which means that a student could acquire 28 credits before they leave high school. Nowhere, the graduation requirement is far fewer than that. And so, we have some students have study halls, and then if they, for some reason, if they get called in for their study hall so they get that extra hour of sleep in the morning, then they may show up as chronically truant. So digging into some of those structural pieces is a part of that. When you see such a dramatic increase as students get older or further along in their careers, the seniors versus the freshmen, there is definitely a structural piece to that needs to be analyzed. That student belonging is certainly a big part of it, but it's one part of, I think, of a larger whole.
Joe.
Yeah, kind of sticking with some of the high school data. The cell phone violations are the number 3 after truancy and tardiness. I know it's too early to have actual data, actual numbers on this, but do you have any anecdotal evidence on how the new cell phone restrictions and earbud restrictions and everything are impacting the number of referrals?
It's too early to tell on a number of referrals basis yet. What I can say is that the implementation has been relatively smooth and seamless. Very few, complaints from students, issues from parents. It's been very well supported. People understand, even our students understand that they are able to focus more when that cell phone is away. So far the implementation of the new procedures has gone really, really well as a whole, but it's too early to tell for any data. We are still in sort of that honeymoon period of everybody getting back to school and being in that mindset. So, we'll be able to report out more as the year goes on, and towards the end of the year when we have our 7-190 presentation in the spring as we get ready to review the parent-student handbook. Our student advocacy specialists and I are actually meeting tomorrow morning, and one of our goals is to produce a report that comes out quarterly that updates us on a more regular basis and provides some actionable information for them as they intervene with students.
Great, thank you. And then, we obviously want to continue, improving within our own district, but can you just share a little bit about what other districts you benchmark against and how our discipline reports look compared to those districts in the state of Illinois?
We can't. There's actually not a lot of districts that provide this type of report to the Board of Education.
Oh, really?
And there are some that have and moved away from it. And so we do so as a result of language within Policy 7190. At least I should say it's not presented in a way formally like we're doing. And so, yeah, so that's just really difficult.
So it's hard to see
do
kind
that.
of where our numbers land within the state. Thank you.
Melissa and then Holly.
Well, I have a few notes. So I want to say thank you with the cell phones. High schoolers said, I know previously one of the problems was that maybe different teachers had kind of their own. And so I heard back that like all the teachers really were strict, which I think helps all of them. And I noticed that the kids took it very seriously, which is nice because then you're not, hopefully it stays like that. So you did a great job with that. As far as there are indicators, so I don't agree with that. There's indicators through our MTS system, Panorama. There are within the frameworks we use. There are benchmarks that were to hit or information or growth. So, and the fact that there might have been changes on the state level with the information gathered, all the data we have of the indicators, we have in our internal data. So that, again, we could actually have indicators, decide as a group, these are the indicators we want, because I guess the biggest thing I keep hearing is, like, I circled it, be sure. But that's the $1 million question. To say that I want, or I want all these kids to do this, we want to make sure. Well, that's how we make sure. And that's why what sometimes is difficult, I go, that would be like having our students be like, we're not going to grade those tests. We're going to, like, you told us you knew what you were doing. I don't mean to be insulting. I'm just exaggerating. It's my way. But I mean, it is in a way of like, this is how, and in work we do that. Like, and this is something we need to teach our students. I don't think you could be in a corporate information and be like, no, we're not going to set goals. We're going to have aspirations. And I know you all have different office, like groups, but where, no, it's outcome based and you stick to it. And as I say this, a lot of times the way I phrase things make it sound negative, but in actuality, when we have those outcomes, those numbers, those can give us all these opportunities to rejoice, celebrate, and be happy, but it answers the $1 million question of be sure. And then my other thing I've brought up, another thing I would say, especially to our new board members, our previous disciplinary had a lot more data. You might want to go back and look at those to get an idea too of information we've had or might be available. The other thing I've brought up in the past, and I still have issue with this, is one of the biggest things is attendance. Now, my understanding, there's a couple of concerns. I went to, I think it was Central, had their presentation with the Innovative Day Experience, but they were talking about the numbers and they talked about the correlation, that it was interesting. They didn't find attendance to negatively impact academic growth, which was fascinating to me. And that's why we want these numbers. So with attendance, one of my things is, attendance is good, but those kids can have a lot of, we talk about mental health, we talk about sickness, we don't know their home lives, where they're coming from, of having just a blanket policy of you get, is it 10 days a semester? Does somebody want to make
Well,
sure?
there's state code on what is expected.
No,
We
I
don't-
know
we
it's.
don't give absent days. Is that
No,
what
but
you're
my
referring to?
son at the high school, I believe, this is a better question for you, that they're instructed that they have 10 days and each semester, because my son has freaked out and not wanted to miss school when he was sick because he's like, Mom, we can't do this. Or he's mentioned to me friends of his freaking out because they're like, so-and-so's mom, she can't afford to go to the doctor, and they'll only excuse it. They won't take the mom's word. They want a doctor's note. So that's why we need to look at the details of, there might be nuances in the attendance issue, and we want to make sure that we're looking at the big picture. Do we want our kids in the classroom as much as possible? Absolutely. But I think that welfare of the students is really what we want to be looking at. The other thing about it is, my understanding for the last, I don't know how many years, is after that 10 days, the students are told that they cannot make up the work. And I have emails, because I had a son who did that one year. And I got the letter saying you can't make up the work. Well, my issue with that is, then you're penalizing kids academically. And that should never happen, for whatever reason, that we take away learning opportunities. That, and then I also heard they went around and talked about losing, off-campus parking stickers. That I'm not so concerned with. But this message of attendance, don't come in when you're sick. We don't want stuff to spread. If your mom can't afford a doctor's note, should we make them get a doctor's note? That I'm not sure, I'm not comfortable with that. And do we penalize kids academically? And if this isn't our policies, why is that at the open houses? Why are the kids being taught this? Why are people going in at home and, during their, what is that? Not study hall, what's the homeroom? Yeah, I think that attendance is important, but it's always balanced against something else, and how are we doing it? And in some of these cases, are we doing what we need to do? We're alienating families by, if you send home a threatening letter, or if kids have whatever issues, where, again, I go to, let's build up our community. Let's be positive. We're going to get much better buy-in and success if we approach it from that versus a punitive approach.
So just to make sure that everyone has the same two state definitions, if someone is chronically absent, that means they've been absent for a total of 10% or more of school days of that academic year. And so that's monitored on a monthly basis, 10% of now, since we've been in school for 3 weeks. And that includes absences with or without cause. So it doesn't mean we have a note, or maybe we do, or the parents called in. The state defines it as 10%. We follow state code. That is how they define it. If a student is chronically truant, then that's a child who has missed 5 or more percent of the previous 180 school days also, and is chronically absent, and they don't have a valid excuse. And I just want to make sure that we are assuming positive intentions of our school support teams, because I know a lot of the deans, assistant principals, social workers, counselors do work endlessly with some of our families and providing them supports. And it is a regular conversation. There's usually weekly meetings where they talk about students' attendance. They review if a student has a medical note or a serious illness. That's not something that they're issuing a truancy letter for and hyper-focused on. It's more for the students who are refusing to come to school, who are having a struggle, who need some more wraparound support. So as someone who spends a lot of time in the schools and sees how hard they're working, there's always room for growth, for sure. And our rates of chronic absenteeism and truancy could be better in this district. And we do need to partner with homes, but I do think we have a lot of amazing resources here and staff who are working really hard for our students and families too. So I just want to make sure that doesn't get lost in this conversation.
No, it's not. But that goes back to my conversation about the other agenda item is, we talk a lot about what we're doing. But as a board member, that's operationals as far as what we're doing. Dan controls operationals. What my job as a board member is to go, I'm outcome focused. So I have to say, and I'm taxpayer focused. So I'm here to say, I hear a lot about these attendance issues, and I've gone to conferences with the III, CASBA, all these different groups that talk about best approaches to this. And if we're not, so on one step, we can say what we're doing, that's great. But if we're not focused on gathering the data and outcome, we don't know which of these approaches is working. We, by our own measure, say that we're not where we want to be. So I just go, okay, so you're telling me you're doing great. We're not getting where we want to be. I'm asking for outcomes in a specific plan, and maybe the voice needs to just not be, that's another thing, the administration. You see it through your lens. My job is not to see it through, I gather everyone's lenses, all the people. So I think that is another thing I think we need to do more of as a school board, is make sure we're listening to all the different perspectives, because it's going to be different for each one.
Okay. Other comments from Holly?
Yeah, sorry, I had additional questions and I didn't want to hit you all with them off the top. Moving away from, the absenteeism and tardies, my biggest concern, and I know this has been a stubborn number and has been a frustrating point previous to this time, is the disparities in our subgroups and exclusionary discipline. And it's a stubborn issue. I saw, working for restorative policies, belonging is going to take time to trickle up, and a lot of things focused on working with students or the students and their families. Just wanted to ask this so much. Obviously, it's a stubborn number, so there's no magic answer, and I realize that. But kind of to split out what we're doing to support our staff and control for or address potential bias from the adult or the staff member in that kind of discipline. And then also, if there are additional steps we are looking for, because we're got to keep trying new things with that stubborn number, just kind of general information there.
I'll let Rakita in a little bit talk a little bit about the training on implicit bias and unconscious bias, but just to look at some of the numbers, we have about 3.8% of our student body overall experiences some sort of exclusionary discipline. That 3.8% is a relatively small number. When you then break that out into ethnic subgroups, or if you're looking at gender, or if you're looking at the nature of the violation, you start getting down to very individualized statistics. And, it's difficult to draw broad generalizations on trends from a very small pool of data. There's a lot more uncertainty when you have 3 or 4 students in a particular, when you start filtering out certain things. We have the information about ethnic subgroups and all the different natures of the violations that could occur. And most of the time in some of those boxes, it's 1 or 3. And so the reason why some of that's not reported at this table is because it gets very personally identifiable. Generally, the state of Illinois does not report out subgroups smaller than 20 in order to preserve the anonymity of those individuals. And so the majority of our exclusionary discipline reporting comes in if you start breaking out by more than one factor into single digits. That being said, there is a tremendous opportunity because we know who those students are as individuals. And so that is where our social workers, our counselors, our student advocacy specialists are so important. One of the questions we received today was about the transition and drawing trends from junior high to high school. And when a student exhibits behaviors, let's say they're down seeing a disciplinarian or a social worker on a regular basis, they get added to a caseload at the very beginning to help assist them with the transition. And if the transition is successful, they can exit that progress monitoring, but can return if we start seeing behavioral concerns at the high school level. It really does become a case of getting to know the individual student and counseling and working with them. One very powerful piece of data I kind of discovered through this year is, teasing out this year's information. When I said that the number of exclusionary events peaks at sophomore year, freshman year strong and stronger sophomore year, falls off dramatically junior year and then senior year. There can be any number of reasons why seniors would be experiencing exclusionary discipline at a far lower rate. Some of that may be just maturity. But there's also a big portion of that which I would attribute to the purposeful instruction that goes on in homerooms, the follow-up by a student advocacy specialist after discipline, so that if a student gets in a fight, that they don't fight again. That if a student is caught with something at school that they should not have, that incident does not repeat itself. And so, seeing that our seniors exit having so few exclusionary discipline events, to me is a sign that the interventions are working. The students may come in and experience some struggles, but by the time they get ready for graduation, those struggles are greatly reduced. And we're happy to see those young men and women cross the stage who, who are on their way to being successful and prosperous adults. So we have to be careful about what conclusions we can draw, but a lot of that, again, goes down to individual students and working with them. There are some general trends. If you back off, you can try and work, try and look at the bigger picture. It is disconcerting to see the disproportionality, but when I did actually break out the students by ethnicity by year in school, and I was very pleased to see that all demographic subgroups improved in their behavior over time. In fact, our minorities who have probably the most disciplinary events improved the most. Difficult to draw any real generalizations because, again, you start getting to, if you're looking at just seniors of certain ethnicities who have exclusionary discipline, you're talking about single digits, in some cases one. But that trend is true when you aggregate the last 3 years, the 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25 school years. That information is consistent over time. So it does show me that there are some celebrations here in the data, in spite of the fact that, early on in their high school career, there may not be that we may not be seeing the behaviors that we want. The trend is generally positive before they exit the system. And then Rakita, if you want to talk about the training.
So first, Holly, I want to thank you for that question and raising that point to the forefront. There are several opportunities within the district for different work groups to get some learning around implicit bias and personal responsibility and impacting change regarding our disciplinary outcomes and understanding one's role and how we respond to those behaviors and how we interpret those behaviors and how we would support students. There is still room for growth, but I will just share some of the work that we're doing. For example, for new educators, and we've been doing this for several years now, our new educators, they have a new educator learning, professional learning program that they participate in. And my department, we actually have a multi-day, multi-hour training opportunities that we provide to them that explicitly, covers topics like implicit bias, for example, as well as culturally responsive teaching, amongst other things. Our substitute teachers, when they, as part of their onboarding process, we also provide them with some implicit bias training. This year, we had the opportunity to work with our transportation staff and providing them some training on implicit bias, at least as an introductory, and there's conversations about continuing that learning. For our other groups, like we have our district equity team, for example, and they are doing a lot of targeted work around, looking at these various outcomes that we're talking about and how we can improve things. And it's sort of like a train-the-trainer model where we provide them building their capacity, and then they can take that information back to their buildings and work with their building equity teams. There's, again, still room for growth and making sure that those things are actually happening. But that's part of that process that we are doing. And then in years past, we have done some more large-scale district-wide efforts and targeted learning around implicit bias. And I'm actually working with the middle school team this year to do more work in that area as well.
Thank you. Is it okay? I have a couple of follow-ups on that, and thank you for sharing what the training is. That's really helpful, and I'm thrilled that it's expanding to other groups, and I appreciate the perspective on how to look at the data. And that's actually what one of my other follow-ups was, because it seems like we lean a lot on like belonging and building belonging throughout our time in school. And again, this might be one that we end up with too small of numbers, but are we aware of, when we're thinking about exclusionary discipline, how many of these students are with us for their whole career or a large chunk of their school career? And do we need different approaches? If someone's been with us through kindergarten and it's been a problem, then that belonging piece is something to look at. But if a student has come to the district later, that's kind of hard to build out of thin air. So just curious if that's something that's relevant, or is it too small of a number?
Well, we did not tease out that data this year. Historically, Patrick has, when he's pulled the data, shown that the vast majority of the students that we see that have exclusionary discipline have been in our school system for their entire academic career. As a district, we have relatively low mobility, and so those students generally are with us the entire time.
So that data that I said before that I wanted broke down into that. That's kind of why I wanted that data, is that it does tell us specifically the different groups. And just so people know too, when we talk about this, I think sometimes like the public thinks we're talking about specific groups of individuals, where what we're talking about here is systems and frameworks for every student who needs that extra help or struggling. Because I personally believe a lot of times, discipline, a lot of times there's a need we can try to fill. So I think that's maybe too. I'd like to reframe it in that by reporting these numbers isn't about, a few bad kids or, that kids struggle. Because I think that's part of the things that kids, like discipline means bad. And these kids are probably the kids who least need to hear you're bad. And so I think if we reframe this to the idea of we're going to measure outcomes, and what I talk about, the data, would be what interventions did this child have? Was there a response? Was that productive? Because it is very individual. But by getting that data, we see, are students escalating after, how long does it take them to get a referral? Or if they're in, what kicks somebody up? Is there automatic? Do we treat all our kids? The problem is if we don't have set standards that we say and processes and we leave it all individual, that's where we get into where everyone's treated subjectively by whoever the person in front of them is. Where part of the reason to get that data and hold people accountable is to say, everyone always has their story, but at some point we have to say, this is the growth we want for our kids. Because again, not saying we're not doing great things, but that's operations. Great, do it. Mine is the outcomes. And if there's areas to grow, I would say that's an opportunity to try new things. Now, to go back, I've myself worked a lot with equity and gone to a lot of conferences. So I'll share with my fellow board members, along with that other information, because it's really rooted in this. There are indicators, and one of the things we want to know, are there indicators? That's one thing we want to chart behavior, because what leads to the next step? Are there things, because what we really want to do is get practices where we don't escalate to the first. And restorative justice, yes, we need to do more with that. I've gone to a lot of seminars about that. It works well. It teaches those kids versus preaching at them. So I think a school district, one of the presentations I went to, I think it was Minnesota, but I'll get you the information. What they did as a group is they kind of had that they didn't see the progress that they wanted. And I talked earlier about those perspectives, those different lenses, that really this isn't a problem that just a classroom teacher can, or just one administrator or one board member. It takes those different groups getting together. So with this particular, there are audits, the outside groups, there's a lot of them. A lot of school districts will do an outside audit. And again, it's not bad. It's just a fresh pair of eyes. But what the Minnesota school district did was they invited, one of the things you'll see with belonging and with attendance, we keep having to have the buy-in of the students and the parents. And I think that's a piece that I feel a lot of the people in our community is they don't feel they have a voice, right, wrong, or indifference. So what this group did is they invited staff members at all different levels. You could have a specialist, because they see them in gym, totally different behavior in gym. We have a teacher, we have, every group and then they have people in the community can participate that have all different backgrounds and have students. So they're ending those perspectives. The staff, we hear a lot that the staff doesn't feel like they're listened to. This is a great opportunity to pull in and say, community, we're listening to you. Have students selected. This is what this group did. Have your students show up, and then they have a voice. It's one more way. I know we do other things with students. Another reoccurring theme is it seems to be all the same. Again, it can just probably by the nature of it, we get a lot of the same students who are already high success or might not be in these categories. We probably want to target the input from students that maybe want to participate that fall into some of this. And then they sat down and they said, we're going to do a data dump. We're going to sit down and look at all the data and see what we as a group think this tells us, and then as a group come up with some possible things to change. That doesn't mean we don't stop the good things we're doing, but I think that it not only can give us some new strategies, I think it respects the voice of all the parties, and I think it's wise because we need the voice of everyone at the table if we want the buy-in and we want to really do it well, because I can't tell you what some of these people, like their background and what their struggles are. So I want to hear it from them. I want to hear it from our students that are most at risk. And you know what? How important would that be to those families, those parents, and those students to say, you're important? Because a lot of those kids, kids think that their behavior is who they are, their worth as a person, and it's just not. And sometimes maybe, if at the end of the day, we just get to say, we care and we hear you, I mean, that's pretty powerful. So I would suggest that the board do something like this. It's a great opportunity to get voice, input, and even if not, our practices don't change that much, I think sometimes it's the journey that's so important too.
So what I would suggest is you've referenced a lot of different pieces of material. So please share that with your fellow board members, including the ones that aren't here, obviously. And that way it will give us opportunity to take a look at what you've provided or what you've uncovered and provided, and then we can have further discussion around that. But unless there's other comments from other board members, I will thank the team. I understand you have other comments? Okay. Thank you guys for your presentation, and then we can move to our next agenda item. Fair? Okay. All right, discussion without action. Item 8.01, press update 118.
Okay, we'll take really 8.01 and 8.02 together, just because it'll be hard to keep separate on which of the press updates it was in. Board, just a reminder, subscribes to IASB's press policy system, which provides updates to recommended or modeled board policy based on changes in law, new laws, modifications to laws, or changes in best practice, precedent cases, things like that. Provides those recommendations through their legal team, and so this helps us keep on top of our policies. Dr. Cohen has presented this to you at the last board meeting, as our typical process will be. This meeting, again, discussion without action. And we'll look for action on the press update 118 and 119 at the September 22nd meeting. Dr. Cohen, is there any new information you need to share?
No, but I do want to thank Mark for recognizing I transposed 2 of the digits in my memo. You know, sometimes I've realized in the last 6 months, I think my need for reading glasses is actually starting to get a little bit more intense. So, but thank you.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles. Just want to make sure we're being clear as a board and as well with the community. And Mark, maybe you can just answer a few questions I have. So one, can you just clarify what specific changes have been made at the federal level to Title IX?
Essentially, Title IX is referred back to the 2020 version, which was in Trump's first administration. We lived with the previous 2020 through most of the Biden administration, and only in June of 2024 did the rules change coming out of the U.S. Department of Education. Immediately upon taking office, Title IX was reverted back. Operationally, not much changed for us. We did adopt the policy in the press update in 2024. But operationally, it didn't change much. Really, the exclusion of gender identity as a protected class in Title IX, it was excluded in 2020's operational rules. It was included in 24 and then eliminated in 25. Operationally, it did not change much of what we do at all. In fact, this was anticipated, and Rakita, who's our Title IX coordinator, would have been able to answer that question as well. As far as our uniform grievance policy, though, is concerned, any student or student staff member, member of the community feels like we've discriminated against them based on their gender identity is entitled to the protections of the Illinois Human Rights Act. That has not changed. That is separate and apart from Title IX. So If somebody were to allege a violation of the Illinois Human Rights Act that did not fall under Title IX, then their relief would be the Uniform Grievance Procedure Policy 2260. Again, operationally, nothing really changes.
Got it. And just to expand a little bit on the Illinois Human Rights Act. So that is not contradictory to Title IX.
The section on the protections for gender identity, the changes to Title IX, I think, are in contradiction with a number of different definitions in a number of different states, including Illinois. How that works out is beyond the scope of our decision-making here in this room. But we're doing the best we can. Now, the Illinois Human Rights Act is more germane to us as Illinois, the states generally have the authority over education. The federal administration has control over education funding from the federal level, but it's not an enumerated power of the federal government. So we rely on the state of Illinois to give us, their statutes, their guidance, and of course, case law. If case law somehow impact our operations, then the press policy would take that into account, and that would be updated.
Got it. And if a student is here in Illinois, we feel they are protected based on the Illinois laws.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So if a student is on an academic team or a sports team and they travel to a different state, what are the protections that they have?
That's a difficult question to answer without knowing the circumstances in the state. Our interscholastic activities and athletics are governed by the Illinois High School Association, and their policies and bylaws reflect state law. If you sign a non-conference out-of-state contract with another school in another state, then that's going to be something that would have to be discussed.
So they may not be covered under Illinois state law, potentially.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Holly?
So I just have, thank you for that explanation. It was really helpful. So essentially what a lot of the press policy is doing is there were citations to Title IX that no longer apply. So it's cleaning that up so that we're citing what authority is there now for Title IX. But the Illinois Human Rights Act has not changed. And we have, there are protections for our students under 5A, which involves public education or educational institutions, for our employees who are public employees under other parts of the Illinois Human Rights Act, and also for public accommodations, because we provide public accommodations. Those are all still the same, and that's why operationally we're not seeing changes under the current Illinois Human Rights Act.
That's correct.
Thank you. And that applies not just for gender identity, but for each part and each protection. Because Title IX has us looking at that one, but all of those protections for each of those groups, national origin, race, real or perceived of any of these things, those have all remained the same under the Illinois Human Rights Act.
That is correct. And by and large, you'll notice if there ever were an allegation of any sort of violation of anybody's human rights, the Policy 2265 on Title IX, it is less of a policy in terms of defining what the, who is protected and under what circumstances, because that comes from the federal government. That's enshrined to them. It is more of an operational policy in terms of if there is an allegation that their Title IX rights are violated, here's how the district will react. And so that Title IX policy enumerates, here's the steps of the process. 2260 is much the same. That process, in fact, the processes are virtually identical. So there's almost no distinction between how we would handle an allegation of a Title IX violation versus some other rights being violated through 2260, because that investigative process and the reports that are produced are the same.
Joe?
And just kind of further clarification about this process and what goes into the content. This language, by and large, is the press language directly, except for the couple of notes that are in the memos where the district policies are actually typically more stringent than the state code requires. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. You know, I would say by and large, more the rule than the exception. It would be our recommendation to accept the press policies as presented because they are vetted by a team of school attorneys, not only from the IASB, but most of the major school district law firms that represent school districts across the state also have a representative on their board. Robin Schwartz has a representative on their board, so an attorney from Robin Schwartz was also consulted on the press policies that come out. There are a number of policies which may be customized. For example, fund balance policy can be different from district to district. Some districts will create certain policies around revenues that come in from a referendum, et cetera. But those are more the exception than the rule. And so we tried to note some of those exceptions in there. For example, the 7190, we review 7190 on an annual basis, so updating 7190 at this time was not necessary. And there are a few others. But by and large, press policy, the nice part about being consistent with press, not adding to or deleting from it, is that when there are changes to the law, whether that's federal, state, case law, et cetera, those changes are automatically reflected in press, and you don't have to go back and say, well, why did we do this? Why did we write in this caveat then? Because sometimes those things can be, if they're not well documented, or maybe they were resulting of one situation that now everybody's forgotten about because it's 10 years later and no one in the room is the same anymore. Sticking with press policy generally keeps you current and keeps you compliant.
Thank you.
Melissa.
All right, I have a question with policy 6310, credit for alternative courses and programs. So the policy we have, or we would pass, it limits a maximum of 2 units of credit towards high school graduation requirements for coursework through colleges, universities, correspondence classes, and special functioning schools. Is that true, that we limit that?
Often that's not the case. We have relationships with College DuPage. When students come to us with transcripts from other institutions, we evaluate those on a case-by-case basis to check for alignment. We have to, if we're going to give credit for high school graduation, we have to make sure that the courses that a student brings in are aligned with the Illinois Learning Standards. So if there's a graduation requirement that says that a student has to take civics, and then they transfer in a course that they say includes civics, we have to then vet the syllabus from that course against the Illinois Learning Standards to make sure that they are meeting all Illinois graduation requirements. So that's usually done on a case-by-case basis, and there are always going to be a few exceptions here and there. We have students that come to us from all over the world with transcripts that sometimes it's challenging to sit down and kind of create a like for like with the course that we offer and their high school equivalent.
Okay, and then my understanding is for dual credit. Okay, so with the case-by-case, this policy states that it would be a maximum of 2 units. And so if we don't actually do that, we might want to look at that number and then...
If I don't interrupt, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure there's a certain clarification. Everything Dr. Cohen said is correct, but where the limitation comes in place is if a student already enrolled is seeking to go find credit from some other serving institution, that is limited to, and I believe we do adhere to that, like a dual credit, for example, or a dual enrollment, by its definition, we are giving credit. We are saying it is ours, so that's not an outside credit. So that's, I think that policy is limiting in terms of I'm going to go to, on my own, this online provider or this way, right? And so that's where the limit is, and we do typically, I believe, universally adhere to that, right? It is something we've talked about looking at in the future, but at this point, not.
So yeah, thank you for that, because I did notice, which I was happy, the dual credit courses were included, and that I have to thank the district. I think it's wonderful, the amount of dual credit classes we have. Not only does it give it, the criteria for some of those classes, because they're technically a college class, provide some rigor. I know they kind of vary in their amount. The other thing is it helps our families. This is money that goes towards, they don't have to spend for a college. So thank you. We are so blessed. But going back through the case by case, we talk about attendance, we have kids with all sorts of issues that if we were to open this up, this might give them some more leeway on what they could take. Say you have a child with, I think what I'm hearing, and I'd have to look at data, but is that a lot of these students, we have more coming back from the pandemic. So I think you have a lot more anxiety, you have a lot of things going on. And again, this is difficult for parents, where if we maybe had a chance for, say, a reset with a child, that they aren't worried about missing school and not being able to keep up, and they could do a program, and maybe they do more than 2 units.
Yeah.
That would be nice. And then I was just going to add, I'm sorry.
Can I add that?
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
so that I don't lose the,
Yeah.
I want to respond to that part. I do think it is critical that our schools work very closely with families and kids in unique situations and look at plans that will help them. But ultimately, if we're going to award a student a Naperville 203 diploma and say that they've met the policy of Naperville 203, State Board of Education, so on and so forth, we have to ensure that we can do that. And just opening up to allow students to take from anywhere, that doesn't do that. And then to just let them do that on their own would really create a very difficult burden on our staff to be able to identify and to vet the syllabi, the course grade, the content, and all of that. So in an effort, it's to, again, we stand in front of the Naperville Central, Naperville North graduates every year, hand them a diploma, and my words or Dr. Cohen's words or something along the lines of, we endorse and certify that the student has met the graduation requirements defined by the Illinois State Board of Education and the Naperville Community Unit School District 203 Board of Education, and we congratulate you on your accomplishments, right? And so I think that's the part that we have to be cautious about.
And to one other point too, I'll say, we have a very robust set of opportunities through our ALOP program, our Alternative Learning Opportunities program. So, in fact, just earlier this year, in I believe it was March or April, the board approved an extension for the Ombudsman program, which we offer both on-site and off-site. We have the Naperville Bridge. We use programs like Edgenuity to help serve our English language learners. So we have a variety of, sort of non-traditional courses that are available to help students that have certain needs, and our staff, our counselors, do a great job of pairing up the right student with the right tool that will help them based on their need.
Thank you very much. And Dan, I completely agree with what you're saying about we want to keep those standards. So under it does say that it has to meet certain criteria. So no, they would have to do the North Central Association of Colleges, secondary schools, and or the Illinois State Board of Education. So I'm not saying we should take everything. That would be a huge, but we do want it to that quality. I'm just saying it might be something to explore. It's something we might want to look at, because I know another thing is our summer courses. That's a time that students, we talk about stress and workload. This gives students the opportunity to maybe take some summer courses over the summer in accredited high standard and be able to take them at home, maybe somewhere else. It gives them flexibility. Or if maybe they work. We have students that work. And that way, when you do it online, a lot of times you can, those students can still participate, but they can still work, which a lot of them need to do for themselves over the summer. What else was I gonna say? Going back to, okay, so this is something, I've had a few people said this to me, and I actually think it's a good idea. So let me do my pitch. Is that somebody said that there's a school district that does that. You'll see the rest of that policy, it talks about other ways to fulfill your physical education requirement. And so like if you're in sports, it would fulfill it. I know our students are really crammed with a lot of opportunities. Another thing that I as a parent struggle with as a high schooler is we have so many great programs and classes that I want them to take. So by the time the child's trying to fill all their requirements or in college or wherever their post, education experience is going to be, so going back to the idea. So basically, and then having a background and knowing a lot of people that kids, we talk about discipline. one of the groups when we talk about groups is kids with 504s or IEPs and so forth. And again, I come from this as my parental perspective and lens, is that it can be very hard. It's a very unstructured time. Kids suffer from, not bullying. I'm not going to say that that's possible, but unstructured time is hard for discipline. It also is hard for kids maybe that aren't as athletic, so that's a stressful time. There's a lot of things that can make gym class stressful. So this particular school district did where you could get credit. We do the great program with 100 hours that you get a special certificate. Isn't it 100 hours that the kids get a community service and they get the cord they can put on at the graduation? But they said if you do so much like housework, mow lawns, or do something in your community that's physically active, and they specified it for senior citizens. We could do whatever, that you work with a community garden, so you're learning more skills, you're getting physical activity, you're maybe developing an interest, and then their thing with the citizens, the senior citizens, is it's a good opportunity for our students to learn and listen to people. A lot of people want them to respect, and it gives an opportunity to expand their scope of who they interact with the day. But we might want to, I think that would be something neat looking forward to, looking at the other PE opportunities for kids in high school, so maybe they can lessen their load and explore other opportunities.
Other questions or comments? Holly?
I had questions on, let me get the number here, the AI, where the AI policy is listed. And so is this, it's one of the blue additions, is the recommendation that we adopt that optional language about the use of artificial intelligence enabled tools?
Can you remind me of that policy number?
It's starts on page 67 of the 83, and let me roll up to get you another number. That is 6235.
It's on page 87.
Sorry, I sent this one 2 weeks ago, but not this.
67.
The update, the 118, 119?
It's in 118. So it's instruction and access to electronic networks, and as you scroll down, there's optional language that looks like we're seeking to adopt regarding the use of artificial intelligence, AI-enabled tools. Like the first sentence is the board recognizes that AI-enabled tools are important to enhance student learning, educator effectiveness, and school operations. Personally, I have a concern about that one, but it is about adopting a policy down the line. So I just wanted to know if it's recommended to adopt that and kind of the procedure for adopting a policy if we do.
So what we can share with you, and I apologize that we didn't get this in here, we do have actually internal procedure around the use of AI. As an example, the board actually approved the purchase of an AI tool for all of our teacher Magic School, right? And so, we do recommend the adoption of this policy with what's here. We'll share with you in advance of next board meeting, kind of what we've identified as our position statement around the use of AI, and an overview of the professional learning and support that's provided for our staff in order to use it.
And so if we adopted this, it requires us to implement the use of AI-enabled tools. The designee will create a district-wide plan. So is that plan you provide already our existing one, or we wouldn't
already
need
have
one?
Yeah. There was other policy that we had kind of linked in through our acceptable use agreement that essentially didn't name AI by name, but it named it in terms of tools and so on and so forth that made it acceptable. I think because now districts are probably asking for AI policy, press is making this recommendation.
Yeah, I noticed that. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't wait.
No, I was going to ask of other questions, so go right ahead.
No, I noticed that too. And then, if when these come up, if there is an existing policy or for one of these, it would be great to have it in the documentation so we know, because I didn't know we had a plan. So moving forward, is that something, Dan, we could get?
I think we did actually share that when we brought to the board the recommendation for the adoption and the purchase of the Magic School tool, which would have been at the end of the 23-24 school year as a part of that budget as a budget initiative, but we'll certainly bring it back to the surface.
Yeah, moving forward, because I don't always remember those past meetings. We have so much, and I already have my readers. So if, when we're considering a policy, that we have attached to it previous information or relevant information, so we know what that plan is. I appreciate that.
Okay. And no other comments? This is coming back, next board meeting. Would that be with action at the next board meeting? Okay, so it comes back next.
With action, if
board-
anything's
next
still
board meeting.
unsettled, then we can certainly pull policy out. We'll probably do it as one, so that, for example, if the board decides that we need a little bit more work on a policy, we could move for approval of press update 118 and 119, except
Except, got
policy
it.
1, 2, 3.
Got it. Okay. So, fellow board members, continue to get your questions in if there are additional questions that we have, because it is coming back for action next time around. Okay? All right. Were we on item 9, or did we? Yes, item 9, discussion with action. Oh, 8.03, yeah, we did 8, we
We
did.
just went with the press updates. This is
0.01 and 02.
a policy that we kind of set aside. We need to get it in place. It's one that's required. We had some conversation about language, but in terms of consulting with council, as was recommended, this is the language that's actually recommended that we have in place.
Questions from the board? Melissa?
Yeah, that policy really ties into what we were talking about before. So I think that maybe this is something we want to look at and look at some of that information I provide you, and maybe we, integrate it or think about how we're going to do that, or if we want to do it, but that we just have that discussion with some of that information.
If you could, just as a reminder, make note of that when you send that information to everyone, that would be helpful, just to link those two together.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions or comments on 8.03? Okay, so that is coming back before the board as well, with action at the next meeting. All right, item 9, discussion with action. We have no discussion with action. Item 10, old business. We have no old business. Item 11, new business. We have no new business. Item 12, upcoming events. Item 12.01, schedule of events.
I'll just note that the next Board of Education meeting is on Monday, September 22nd, 2025.
Is a success cookout on there as well?
It's not on here. We typically just put in things impacting the district calendar, but that is scheduled for Saturday, September 13th, this upcoming Saturday. I believe the time is 1 to 3:30 at Seeger Park.
Correct. Yes, and don't we also have a ribbon?
We do.
for Connections?
What's that date? 30, I think it's Thursday, September 18th as well.
Okay.
Yep,
Sure.
Thursday,
That
September 18th.
that sounds familiar, yes, thank you.
Yep,
The
6
pop-
o'clock.
That's next week. Haven't gotten to next week yet.
All right.
Oh,
Melissa, you have a
I was
question?
just going to say, and I don't know, I think it was yesterday or the day before, over the weekend sometime, I don't know if it was on something we received and it said to have the calendar, or if I was on the website. But I went on the district website where it says calendar of events, and it didn't have anything on there. Is that accurate?
I don't know what you're talking about.
So if you go on
I know where the district event calendar is. I don't know what specific events you're talking about.
any, I kind of flipped through and was like, oh, so I didn't know if maybe it's a me issue, if somebody could send me, like redirect me where I'd find. No, that's just school board, but like the district for parents to look up, for them to be able to look at it and see what's going on. Or even as a board member, I don't just participate in board meetings. I like to go to different events. So it's nice
There's
to,
a tab clearly labeled on the district homepage.
It
that says
is, but-
District calendars, and if you scroll down District 203 calendar, now I see your issue.
Yeah.
There's nothing populating in here.
no,
Not a
and I
lot.
thought,
But what you do though is, particularly you would go to a school, an individual school. We can't populate every individual school on the one district calendar because there wouldn't be enough room for it.
well, or maybe just have, well, I'm not sure we should have a tab and not have it there. And maybe,
It is there.
No, no, but there's
just
nothing-
nothing in September. If you go to October, there's some things that are highlighted on that calendar. You go to November, there are some.
okay, it's just hard. Like I said, people have multiple kids at multiple places. I can't help but think with technology these days, or AI. We could do something, or maybe you click on sports calendar or something extra so you can actually see what's coming up and participate. It's just an idea.
Right, we have had some technical stuff with this calendar. We are switching over to a new web page that will, in the IT team will be working to make some connections too, so.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 13, adjournment. Item 13.01, motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Kuzminski,
Aye.
Plastic,
Aye.
Kush,
Aye.
Kelly Black,
Aye.
Walensky.
Aye.
The motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you and good evening.